I need to mute
Hello,
somebody.
hello, people. Thank you and welcome again. We are back to Women in Agile Africa 2022 conference. The conference have started since few hours now. Sessions have been going on, and we are here to start the Sheinka Harris's session that is titled Agility for Ops, Maximizing Efficiency and adaptability of non-IT team. I'm really happy to be the one to present. And then for those who doesn't know me, I'm Abigail Yete. I'm a passionate agilist and also breastfeeding advocacy. I have my center called Vino Center where I fight, I help working moms like you and I to continue breastfeeding their kids, exclusively breastfeeding their kids from 0 to 6 months. So this talk is not about me, it's about Sheinka Harris, and I will let the floor to Sheinka to present herself, present what she do in her everyday life, and then go through her talk. Thank you, people. Sheinka.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my talk. As Abigail mentioned a while ago, it's Agility for Ops, Maximizing Efficiency and Adaptability of Non-IT Teams. In terms of what I'll be going through for this session, I will just be sharing some typical challenges that non-IT teams face in their Agile adoption, benefits that can be realized once these challenges are overcome, a view into my very own adoption implementation at QualityWorks with our sales operations.
Sheinka, don't worry. I'll be managing the backstage. I'll be muting people that are talking.
Okay. Yeah. So looking at my own adoption implementation at QualityWorks, or results and some tips that the persons on the call here you can use for your very own implementation in your own organization or maybe in your personal lives. So a little bit about me before, we get into the details of the talk. I am an Agile coach and the manager of Agile Transformation at QualityWorks Consulting Group. I am Jamaican. I do live and work here in Kingston, Jamaica. I have over 6 years of experience working with product and enterprise level teams across the US, Caribbean, and Latin America to define how they go about, supporting their individual and joint visions as they work towards becoming agile. I have worked largely in the finance and e-commerce spaces with additional experience in the healthcare, entertainment, and compliance industries. I have had the privilege of playing pretty much all the roles across the software development lifecycle. So I've been a Scrum Master, product owner, developer, and quality assurance engineer on multiple teams. And that is what I use now. And I leverage the experience and skills, learned while acting in these different roles to actually help organizations in their move to agility. Now, to get into where we're all here, looking at how Agile can be applied to non-IT teams. Before I get into that portion of things, we know that Agile was created to address the limitations of traditional software development methodologies by prioritizing flexibility, customer satisfaction, and collaboration, as well as the ability to respond to change effectively and ultimately aiming to deliver high quality software more efficiently, right? So just like these software teams, operations teams, your sales, your marketing, your legal, those teams who may not have that IT background, they have these similar limitations where, they want to be more flexible. They want to satisfy their customers. They want to be able to collaborate with each other to get the necessary results and to deliver to those customers faster. So with this, having seen the results of my technical teams, as they navigated and applied the values and principles of Agile, I would have decided, why not try Agile with these business operations teams? So I do want persons in the chat to either unmute themselves or to just type in the chat, what are some challenges that you think non-IT teams may face as they try to adopt agility? So as they try to adapt the principles to fit the unique needs of, say, a marketing team or a legal team or HR to get similar results as a software development team? What do you think are some possible challenges that we would have to be mindful of? Nobody wants to give it a try? Feel free to unmute or type in the chat.
I would say ad hoc request comes in more quickly to ops teams versus a software development team. Software development teams mostly have like their own roadmaps, you know, and then with the operations team, you might have monthly or daily tasks. And then with those tasks, you still may have ad hoc requests coming in. So that would be a challenge, like balancing the ad hoc request.
Okay, thanks, Jody. I see in the chat from Anna, not being familiar with Agile methodology, being tempted to stick with the norm, even if that is not effective. Does anybody else want?
Yes, I would like to add maybe the typical Agile structure, like organizational, the protocol. So when translated into a non-IT organization, sometimes it comes a challenge.
Okay. All right, great. All right, so I'm going to move into, some of the challenges that I have here. So the first of which is different workflows. So non-IT teams often have unique workflows and processes that don't necessarily align with the iterative and incremental nature of Agile. So adapting Agile practices to fit these workflows can be complex. So we have like for legal, where they need to follow like a strict process in order to get things through. For marketing, they may have certain nuances that may not necessarily fit into how Agile was originally prescribed for software development teams. So there's that consideration that needs to be made. The second one is limited understanding of Agile. So this is where, you may have persons on the team or the entire team may not necessarily know what the values and principles are. They're just being exposed to this thing, or they've heard of agility, but they don't necessarily know how to apply it to get the results that they actually want. So with this, education and training will, of course, be necessary, but of course, it's going to take time and resources. So that's going to take them away from their day-to-day. With software development teams, we typically have the bandwidth to take time away to experiment and look at what these values and principles are, their experimentation. But because of the huge workload of some of these operations team, because it isn't in their norm, or it isn't something that is a given for them, it's going to take a bit more effort for them to translate and apply the values and principles to their day-to-day. The next one is the issue of different deliverables, because this comes about given that non-IT teams often produce different types of deliverables compared to software development teams, making it unclear how Agile principles should be applied to their outputs. So for a software development team, that you're working to produce some product, some service, you're working to deliver some software. So it's very clear what your product is. But for the different teams in a non-IT space, it's hard for you to translate to say what exactly is our product, what are we actually delivering to some customer, who is our actual customer. So figuring out what constitutes a working product can be ambiguous for these teams. Next up, there is measuring progress. So Agile relies heavily on metrics like working software or completed features to measure progress. Non-IT teams may struggle to identify and quantify whatever work they're doing in a similar manner, making it harder for them to actually assess progress accurately. Next up, cross-functional challenges. So whilst cross-functional teams are a core aspect of Agile, bringing together diverse skill sets in non-IT teams may be more complicated. So, you know, for an IT team, for a software development team, you can have front-end developers, back-end developers, UI, UX, you have your tester. Those different roles come together and you can facilitate cross-functionality because you can have back-end learning, some front-end rudiments and so forth. But it's a lot harder for a non-IT space where you have persons from HR, people and culture, legal, marketing, and say accounting coming together. It's hard for you to do that translation to get the cross-functional nature growing there. So, you know, teams might not naturally have the mix of skills needed for Agile to work optimally in a non-IT space. So there's that consideration as well. The final thing that I wanted to touch on as it relates to challenges would be the limited tool support. So many Agile tools and softwares were originally designed for IT-centric projects. So finding suitable tools for non-IT teams can be challenging, and they may need to initially resort to manual methods or some makeshift solution to fit their unique needs. So based on those 6 challenges that I would have just discussed a while ago, the unique needs of, you know, these different non-IT teams, there's clearly some customization that is required. So there needs to be a delicate balance struck between retaining Agile's core principles and accommodating these unique requirements. Which brings me to my next question. How do you think we can customize agility to fit different teams? Again, feel free to unmute or post your comments in the chat. No one wants to give this a go? Be reminded there are no wrong answers here. We're all here to learn. So feel free to just unmute or, you know, send your comments in the chat. Okay, so Anna says, adopt the Agile methodology on an incremental basis as the team becomes more familiar with the methodology. That sounds good, yeah. So instead of throwing everything at them all at once, you expose them to a bit at a time, you know, so you get them adjusted to working, you know, say doing stand-ups or actually planning the work that they're going to be doing for a particular increment. So that's great. Anyone else? All right, so okay, so another way that you can actually customize agility to fit in on IT teams is looking at, so I mentioned limited tool support. So you can look at the different tools that they have out there for software development teams as it pertains to making work visible. So one thing that we did for my non-IT teams, so the business operations teams, they know our tech teams to use Jira. That was a bit daunting for them because Jira is this big bad beast with a whole lot of workflows that don't necessarily work, or they don't need that many workflows. So what they did in terms of their customization, they chose a smaller scale application, which was Trello. And instead of having for our tech teams, we have about 8 columns or swim lanes that we move work through. They only had 4. To do, in progress, blocked and done. So that was the main thing that they needed. So we looked at the core needs of this team. What did they need to have visible? And we modified their sprint board to be just that, to just have those things, not thinking about, you know, hey, this is what the tech team has. We focused on what our operations teams needed. Another customization, kind of segueing or kind of piggybacking off of what Anna said, it was we modified the actual process. So, for the traditional Scrum implementation, you have your daily stand-ups, you have your sprint planning, you have your backlog grooming, your demos and your retrospectives. We didn't necessarily have daily stand-ups in the sense that we met every day for 15 minutes. And I'll go into this a bit later down, but we modified the process because it became too many meetings for our business operations teams on top of the million other meetings that they had. So we downsized the amount of daily stand-ups that we had. We merged backlog grooming and sprint planning, and those are some of the customizations that we would have done to accommodate their specific and unique needs. All right, so moving on to the next slide. So once the different customizations are done, there will of course be certain benefits that can be realized. So some of the same benefits that our software development teams realize as they work through, adopting agility to suit them. So the first one that I want to go into is customer centricity. So we know that Agile places a strong emphasis on customer feedback and involvement, leading to products and solutions that better meet customers' needs. So once they started applying agility and they started working in their increments and started including customers or putting more focus on actually speaking with their customers, whoever that may be, they saw the results, they saw where they were able to deliver products, whatever their products were, that actually met the needs of their customers. The next one is increased quality. So practices like continuous integration and testing can be applied to ensure high quality outcomes in various contexts. So whether it was the finance team doing a bit of testing on their part to see, hey, what measures worked for them, also for the HR team, what did the customers actually like, testing different methods. It led to fewer issues, reduced rework on there. And if there were some policies that needed to be created, it resulted in less rework on their end and of course, improved customer satisfaction. There's also transparency and visibility. So Agile provides tools and techniques for tracking progress and sharing information. So I mentioned earlier the use of the Trello board for my operations team. So this transparency can be valuable in project management because it enables stakeholders to have a clear view of project status and potential issues. Next up is risk management. So as we know, Agile encourages the identification and mitigation of risks early in the process. So this proactive risk management approach can be applied to any project at all to minimize the impact of unexpected challenges. There is efficient resource utilization. So teams can now focus on high priority tasks and avoid unnecessary work. So being able to visualize the work that is coming upstream, they have it on their board, they know what they need to do for the next 2 weeks to a month based on how they're planning. This allows for efficient resource allocation. And this can be valuable in any context where resources are limited or there's a need for it to be optimized. There is sustainability, which we know Agile promotes. There is a sustainable pace that we're all trying to achieve so that, we don't have burnout and we can focus on quality. And it's also very crucial for maintaining employee well-being in any department or industry. So this is a benefit for non-IT teams as they move to adopt agility. And finally, there is enhanced collaboration. So earlier I mentioned, a challenge being, the whole cross-functional nature of teams. So this collaboration can be applied to any project or initiative where diverse skills and expertise are needed because it improves communication and knowledge sharing. So you may have some persons across the non-IT team space, taking on some tasks of another team member, just so that they can learn and, knowledge share and enhance the level of communication amongst the group. Any questions, comments, or concerns before I move to the next area? All right, taking that as a no. So I did want to share the Quality Works story, a tale of how did we not only successfully convince our sales, legal, and the wider business operations teams to become agile, but how did we actually increase their throughput and efficiency and actually integrate all of the different groups? So it's pretty much started with a request from my boss where she said, I need some help in revamping how the ops team does work. So, the team hasn't been able to necessarily accomplish the priority items that we would have agreed upon. And I don't even know what they actually are working on. So pretty much the business operations teams, were generally accustomed to working in their different silos. And from an outside perspective, it kind of seemed like they required level 1 security clearance to share some information about what they were doing, what was going on in the different departments. So these teams typically have certain intricacies to their day-to-day that sometimes require them to work in their different pods, and this doesn't bode well for the team, or in this case, their boss, that pretty much depend on the output from these different units to make certain decisions, or for the teams that may be required to actually lend a hand. So outsiders are constantly left guessing as it relates to what happens or what's being done and where they need to render assistance. Further exploration, as we assess the situation to see, what were some of the root causes behind them not being able to get their priority tasks done, it also showed that this team was bogged down with ad hoc requests, which Jody mentioned earlier. For the team, they couldn't get to do their main work items. So ad hoc requests are anything outside of your day-to-day things, the things that you would have had slated on your plate to do. So anything coming from a team member, hey, I need some help with this, any random task that comes up outside of regularly scheduled programming, right? So when we considered what to do to get them the results that they wanted, Agile, of course, came to mind because that's just pretty much what we do. We are an Agile consulting firm. So we decided, why not use the same things that we've been training a lot of other different technical teams to do to improve our own non-technical processes. So, of course, when we brought this to the operations team, they did have some reservations. The first of which was, their first attempt failed because they had tried doing it on their own before, but some of the challenges that would have expressed earlier, one of the main one being, limited understanding of Agile, not necessarily knowing what their product was, not necessarily having the right tool set that caused them to fail. They also said that, Agile only works for tech or software development teams because that was the mindset it was created for them. So it wouldn't necessarily work for us since we are not technical. They did share that they don't have any working software that can be delivered come sprint end. They didn't know how to shift their processes to fit into a Scrum operation or model. And there was this underlying question that, what if we don't do it right? So there was that fear that they wouldn't be able to actually become Agile. So to ease everyone's mind, we did come up with a plan of action that had 3 steps. The first of which was to train them. We wanted to provide insights on the basics of agility. What are the values, what are the principles that we'll be applying to your day-to-day to get you the results that you wanted. We wanted to help the team to understand what it meant to actually be Agile, not just go through the ropes of having, a stand-up or a planning session. What did it mean to actually embody and become Agile? The second step was testing. So we defined what the approach would be, and define an experiment to see how we can achieve the different pillars whilst still instilling the values and principles into their everyday. So Agile is all about testing hypotheses, seeing what works, seeing what want to stop, start, and continue, and then making the necessary adjustments, which brings me to the third step, which was improve. We wanted to zone in on the results of these experiments, zoning on what was working for the team, what isn't working, and then know the areas that needed to be improved and come up with ways that we were actually going to improve. What were we going to change to become better, to get us closer to the results that we wanted? Their ultimate goal, they wanted to achieve a better understanding of what other departments were up to and identify areas of overlap and opportunities for collaboration. So they wanted to increase transparency and collaboration, not just in their own group as a wider business operations team, but they also wanted to know what other departments in the organization were up to. So, like tech, they wanted to collaborate with tech on different initiatives so that we could have a more seamless operation. They wanted to increase flexibility. So they wanted to be better equipped to respond to changes in the workplace and their respective customer requirements. So again, being better able to get their priority tasks completed while still accommodating any ad hoc requests that may come in from the wider organization or their boss. The final one, faster feedback. They wanted to explore working in shorter iterations, which would allow them for faster or more frequent feedback from their stakeholders. So instead of planning for an entire quarter and being heads down working throughout that entire quarter to get something completed, only to at the end of that 3 months hear, hey, this wasn't what we wanted. You kind of veered off of the path that we wanted it to go on. We want to work in shorter iterations where we can say at the end of 2 weeks, are we aligned? Does this track with what you had, the expectations that you had? Does this get us closer to our goal or not? So the step-by-step approach as it relates to all that we did to achieve our results. So there were a few reconciliations that we had to make before we actually started. We really had to frame the overall endeavor in a way that would resonate with them and really connect with this team to, inspire them, to help them to really understand what was to be undertaken, over the next however long, from now until the future, the end of time. So the first was actually defining what their product was, since this was a challenge for them and for non-IT teams in general. What constitutes a product in their specific context? So my question to persons here, what would you say a product would be from a non-IT perspective? So for whatever perspective you're choosing, whether it is from a business operations, it may be from construction, it may be from, healthcare, whatever it is, what would you say a product would be from any non-IT perspective? Right, so Fanny is saying a marketing brief. Okay, so from a marketing team's perspective, their marketing brief would be a product. Great. Anybody else? All right, and I'm saying a legal SOP manual. Awesome. I'll take one more. Anybody? All right, so now they're saying procedures, manuals, guidelines. Great, so those are all correct. So to give an actual definition of what a product is pretty much a vehicle to deliver value. And this is coming from the latest Scrum guide. So it would have been modified to really encapsulate what a product is, not only looking at it from a product development or from a software development perspective, but they broadened the scope to really include any and everything. So they said a product is a vehicle to deliver value. It could be a service, a physical product, or something more abstract. So since this was the business operations teams, we looked at the product as policies, job descriptions, recruitment drives that we needed to put on. From a sales perspective, it was conferences that we were looking to go to. From an accounting perspective, looking at a salary calculator, looking at putting in bids for sponsorship, that sort of thing, marketing strategies. These are the things that they needed to execute. These are the things that they do that deliver intrinsic value to the organization. So this would be their different products. So once we had what their product was, defined in a way that everyone could understand, we went through some basic training to introduce them to the techniques that they would be leveraging. So we had 2 core training sessions that were conducted. There was an intro to agility session that I would have led that covered all the basics. What is Agile? What are the values and principles? Since these were supposed to be, the guiding light that they would be applying in their day-to-day to get the results that they wanted. We looked at the basic Scrum ceremonies and artifacts, since, Scrum was the framework that would be utilized by the team. We looked at what process agility was and, the whole process of reframing work to focus on outcomes instead of output. We looked at, creating their business backlog. The second session was around prioritization, since this is something that would be crucial for them to look at, managing, that fine line between getting their priority work completed, ascertaining what is priority, and then being able to accommodate some ad hoc requests. So we covered basic prioritization techniques that could be leveraged to pinpoint the most critical pieces of work to be actioned. for the different increments. They would have been exposed to the Moscow method, which is the must have, should have, could have, and won't do way of prioritizing work. So because this was at the time the simplest way of looking at their actual work to be completed. So if we can say, what must we do for the next 2 weeks or for this quarter? What can we do? But it's not going to, we can do it, but it's not a huge deal if we don't do it. And pretty much what won't we be doing? What will we be deferring to a future time? So next quarter, next year, it won't have an impact on business or business goals if we really and truly don't get this particular piece of item completed. They were also exposed to root cause analysis. So based on the nature of their day-to-day operations and the issues they had to solve, this was a great skill for them to learn in terms of looking at issues that may come up on a day-to-day and drilling down to what the actual root cause was, what the actual underlying issue was, so that they could solve for it. And then as a means of rounding out their preparation efforts, we had a sprint 0. So this was basically the first sprint where these teams got their toes wet. They got to play around and go through the motions to ensure that everyone had a clear understanding of what to expect and the full reason and benefit of each interaction and activity that they would have learned in the intro to agility and the prioritization sessions. So this sprint 0 is basically them applying their learnings to see, okay, what feels good, what feels kind of wonky, what do we need to tweak going forward in this experiment that we're conducting for this team. Before I continue, any questions or comments that anyone would like to share? All right, taking that as a no. So as we worked through, or different processes, we identified kinks and so forth, we came up with a core process that the team would be following going forward, of course, continuously assessing and, making tweaks as we go along. So the first one was being able to strategize. So this is where the quarterly objectives and key results would have been set alongside the technical team at the last week of each of the quarters for the upcoming period. So that helped to put perspective as it relates to what their priorities were for the next 3 months, right? So we looked at prioritizing or aligning on what the objectives were for the next quarter. That would help them in their upcoming sprint planning sessions as they work through the next 3 months to say, these are what we are working towards. These are the high-level objectives and key results that we're working towards. So that helped them to better strategize and ultimately prioritize. As it comes on to visualization, as what I've mentioned earlier, they utilized Trello to visualize the work to be done. It's a very simple setup, 4 columns, 2 different boards with their master backlog where they put everything under the sun that came up, and then they moved it to their sprint boards where they would have then done their priorities to say, hey, this is what we're going to be focusing on the next 2 weeks. They would have looked at downsizing some of the work. So as we know, some policies have a lot of different components. So for things like those, they would split them into smaller, more manageable items so that they could have faster feedback. So they would show a portion of the policy to the wider team, to say the managers and leads, to say, hey, this is what we would have worked on for the past 2 weeks. Does this align? Are we on the right track? Does this make sense to everyone here? Then, they would be working in 2-week increments. So every 2 weeks, they would go through the motions, they would go through these different ceremonies and so forth, and then showcase work. From a leadership perspective or managing the entire process for them, I was alongside the head of operations who acted as their scrum master. So this was the person who, helped to remove any impediments. She would have understood, what everyone was doing and who needed to do what. She was also that blockade to any external influences. And we had a process where for the ad hoc requests, since they were so frequent, we came up with a process where a submission had to be made to her, outlining, the details of the ad hoc request, timelines, what was needed, any supporting documents, and she would prioritize and field those to the necessary persons, just based on her understanding of, what is priority for this team to complete within this period, and then, where this fell as it relates to timeline. Next up, we have prioritization. So prioritization sessions were held weekly with the CEO, head of tech, and sales to determine next steps, dependencies, and general business direction to ensure that everyone was aligned. All work that was being completed across the organization was aligned to achieve our business goals. Next up, we had updates being sent daily in the Slack channel with 15-minute touch points on Wednesdays and Fridays. So this was a customization, again, that we had to do for the business operations teams. Try to limit the meetings. So instead of having stand-ups every day, given that this team really and truly, they were always in conversation, they were always on calls together, so they knew what they were doing. Just as a means of rounding out the communications, they would just send a quick update in the Slack channels daily, and a 15-minute touch point on Wednesdays and Fridays, just to see if there were any blockers or to have further discussions. As I mentioned earlier, to streamline the process, an ad hoc request process was created to streamline new work coming during the sprint. This was submitted to the head of operations so that, it could be allocated. And then we had joint demo sessions with the sales and tech team, which was to extend the transparency, not just within the business operations team, which would have been like people and culture, HR, accounts, and so forth. We extended it to also have a demo session with the sales and tech team so that all of the major divisions within the organization would have a clear understanding of what each team was doing and how it all came together for us to achieve our larger business goals. Now, after a few iterations, of following and tweaking the process, I'm gonna share some things that they had to say. So some persons on the teams that I've mentioned that, tasks were completed more effectively, knowing that there was a set time frame for completion. They had priorities aligned, assigned and organized. They were able to identify what tasks needed more priority than the other. And doing this was a huge help in getting projects completed in a timely manner. Teamwork and delegation, would have been improved upon in the different sprints. The execution of joint tasks ended well because we were where we needed. We knew where we were needed and what was required of us and when. A huge thing for them was being able to document their wins and see how they impact the company and others. So through the Trello board, being able to visualize their work and tracking it to say, hey, for this sprint, we're able to accomplish this much work. Previously, it would have just been a case where, hey, we did some stuff, we know that we had some amount of impact on the business goals and we're able to accomplish some things, but actually being able to see on a board to say, hey, we would have accomplished 20 tasks for this sprint, that's a lot, that says a lot. And to go to a wider group to say, hey guys, we accomplished 20 tasks for this sprint, you can actually show, and it gives a better sense of, being proud to say, hey, we accomplished this much versus, not knowing, just going through the motions and saying, hey, we did some stuff, not really sure what, not really sure how we helped the organization, but being able to have those demo sessions, having persons see every 2 weeks what your impact is, that was great. They also mentioned that transparency across the departments, on the operations team, they knew what each was working on, the issues that they were facing on any blockers, so that each person or each team could jump in and help where necessary. There was also that the team was organized and the tasks were completed on time. All right, so as the different teams, as they got the hang of things, these are some of the ways that they use Agile to make their lives easier. So as it relates to client acquisition, the sales and marketing teams adopted Agile practices to better understand customer needs and, adapt their strategies accordingly. So they devised a customer-centric approach, or they utilized a customer-centric approach, which was persona creation. So for the different services that, from a sales and marketing perspective, for the different users that we're looking to target from a quality assurance perspective, product development, Agile transformation, we created actual personas for these different target audiences so that we would know for our different marketing campaigns and so forth, these are the types of people that we should be including in these different campaigns so that we could better align and ensure that, we are achieving our different business goals. We had, instead of rigid long-term marketing plans, Agile allowed for shorter iterative marketing campaigns. This is where, the teams tested different approaches and adjusted their strategies based on real-time feedback and market changes. And there was regular review and adaptation through data-driven decisions to optimize approaches. So they looked at what was working, what wasn't working, and adjusted accordingly. For the accounting team or the finance department, they had budgeting and forecasting through the use of budgeting techniques like rolling forecasts and incremental budget adjustments. So instead of having this big long budget for there, they broke it up into quarters and adjusted accordingly. So if these things were happening this quarter, they accounted for it and so forth. There was also cost control by conducting regular financial reviews and cost analyses. They were able to manage resource allocation effectively and efficiently based on changing project priorities. And then they were able to assess financial risks as they emerge and adjust their strategies accordingly. So these were done on a sprintly basis or 2-week increments. And if they needed to be extended to across the portal, these were the different things that our finance department would have done. From an HR perspective, they used Kanban boards, in Trello to track job openings, and candidate pipelines. They adjusted the staffing levels and skills development initiatives across the organization based on the evolving business needs. So if there was a project coming up, they would add some amount of training or upskilling to the pipeline to ensure that we were covered and our consultants were fully prepared to go on the different projects. And they used employee feedback on their different roles and the overall company culture to make continuous improvement. So whether it was to plan more team engagement activities or to come up with additional policies to ensure that, the team was covered and everyone was happy. Those were some of the ways that the HR team actually used Agile to get the results that they wanted. So as it relates to the results, the different units were able to achieve an 80% increase in transparency. And these results, I came about these through conducting a very simple survey with the different teams, just to ensure that, the figures are correct. So we had an 80% increase in transparency. There was a better knowledge of what the different departments were working on at specific periods, clear understanding of where and when support was needed. There was a 90% increase in customer satisfaction. So stakeholders, which would be the CEO and the employees, were pleased with the results. There was a faster release of new items. So we saw more policies coming about or segments of policies. We had persons being in the know. We had from a engagement perspective, because they were doing these constant surveys of what was working for the teams, what wasn't, where they needed to address certain roles and so forth. There was an increase in customer satisfaction there because persons were seeing more things happening that aligned with what they actually wanted. There was also a 90% increase in release to market. So having tasks broken down into smaller, more manageable components, coupled with faster feedback loops, saw the team accomplishing and releasing more. So again, being able to break things up into smaller chunks instead of working on the full gamut of work all at once, they broke it up and they were able to share that with the organization a lot faster than if they had tried to complete everything before actually sharing it. Any questions, comments, or concerns before I move on? No? All right. So I do have 5 really quick tips that I want to share so that you guys can, replicate the same results in your own organization. So the first of which is, don't worry about the fact that this was originally designed for software teams. You really want to focus on the values and principles and use these as a guiding light for your team. So instead of trying to replicate or trying to force yourselves into the process that Scrum says, you need to have a Scrum Master and a product owner, and you need to be doing these different ceremonies and producing these different artifacts. Try to embody the values and the principles, focus on your customers, focus on having something to show them at the end of every 2 weeks, if that is what you're working towards, instead of saying, I need to be having daily stand-ups for 15 minutes. I need to be doing sprint planning. I need to be doing backlog grooming. There's any need, and this is showcased in the principles as well. It's your retrospective, ensuring that you're inspecting and adapting as you go along. So once you focus on the values and principles, you'll be fine. The next tip is ensure that you tailor the process to fit how your teams operate. You want to experiment and be open to trying new things. If something fails, be open to trying again and embrace the feedback loops to learn from mistakes and refine processes along the way. Agility is all about being flexible, and in order to be flexible, you want to try different things, see what works, test out different hypotheses. You're not going to know if it works for your team unless you actually try it out. So experiment and be open to failing. You are very likely going to fail at some things, but don't let that deter you from actually continuing along the journey. Dust yourself off, give your teams some words of motivation, bring in other persons so that you can share your learnings and just try again. The next one is to trust your team's skills and expertise. So this is going to be a new approach for you if you're looking to, adopt agility for your non-IT team. It's going to be a very new approach. It's something that you haven't tried before. But the good thing about it is that you already have all you need to tackle the same work. So it's the same work that you're going to be doing. You're just doing like some minor adjustments here and there. They may seem pretty major because it's a new way of working, but you're just doing some adjustments here and there to get you better or faster results. So you're just doing your work in a new way. So you really need to believe in your team to succeed. They do have, the innate capabilities to actually get the work done in this new way. The next one is to collaborate. So you want to work with other teams in your company or other teams that you may know who have adopted agility and are succeeding to actually achieve your goals. So you don't want to think about this endeavor as just being for your operations team or just being for this construction company or legal or whatever. Think about how can tech or IT support you? How can another team in the organization who may have already gone through this transition, how can they support you? And how can you extend your efforts to other departments to achieve even better results? How can you invite others to the fold so that you can have a more holistic approach and even better results right across the organization or right across your area? The final one is to embrace the change to Agile. Give yourself, whilst you're embracing the change, give yourself grace while making these different changes. As I mentioned earlier, through experimentations, you may not always get it right, but there are some learnings to glean from every single experiment. So apply the changes that needed to be made. You might not get any of it right to begin with, but in time, you'll be okay. You'll figure out what works for your specific team, what works to achieve the results that you want. So embrace the change. Don't be too rigid. Don't say that, hey, I don't want to try this because this is what other teams are doing. Don't really focus on what other teams are doing. Focus on what will work for your team. So that is it for what I had to share today. I really hope that everyone here got some valuable tidbits from what was shared in the past 48 minutes. If you have any questions about the content shared here, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or any of the other socials that I have linked here. I'm happy to help and continue the conversation. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thank you, Shenka. I'm sure everybody got something to take with. For me, that I'm coming from a no-IT organization, it was a wow lesson. Thanks. So, questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and put your question or comment to Shenka. We still have a few minutes before the next session, so let's do it.
I can see that in the comments while people are gathering courage to actually unmute. We have a lot of excellent talk, great thank you and thank you. So you have Bola that's saying thank you, and Jenny and Ria. I'm really, as an Agilist also, I've learned a lot on this session, even being in the environment for a long time. So really, really invaluable information and context and strategies in this session. So thank you. I'm also saying thank you on this one.
You're very welcome.
I may have one question on, so you said that it was about making sure to show the results so that the management trusts you to actually do more things with the transformation. So my question was, my question is actually, how do you get that first go, right? Even to be able to try, to be able to show those results. How do you talk or convince or talk to them to make them want to try? Then we get somewhere.
So it really is all about showing them proof in other areas. So showing them that not only from an non-IT perspective, but in general, when doing a transformation, when working with persons to actually adopt and become agile, it really helps to show them applications in different areas. So if I'm going into a non-IT team to say, hey, let's try this, I go to them with results from other organizations to say, hey, this firm did this, they achieved this. This is how we can replicate it with your team, and you can get similar, if not better results. It's the very same in going into a wider organization to do organizational transformation. I go in with, facts, because a lot of persons, they like seeing that, I'm not using them as a guinea pig to push my own agenda. I'm showing them the verifiable proof in other organizations and other groups that are along the same track as them. So if I'm going into a financial institution, I'm pulling metrics from other financial institutions to say, hey, these are results that they achieved in X amount of time, with these different variations and so forth. For non-IT teams, this engagement, I guess, experiment, if you will, it's still ongoing. It started about 2 years ago where we started the trainings. We've had to do a lot of adjustments. I pulled information from other persons in this space, looking at the persons that I have in my contacts. And actually this talk was born out of a question I got last year at Women in Agile Africa, where persons were asking me how to transform non-IT or non-technical organizations. So I pulled metrics from my contacts. I reached out to persons in my network to say, hey, have you ever tried this with non-IT teams before? What were some of the things that you did? What were some of the results? And then use that to show them that, this can actually work.
Oops. I was going to say that I think that's very useful and informative. So it's a very, very good thing. I never thought about taking an example from another place, but I definitely believe that, as you mentioned, they don't want to be a guinea pig. They want to know that you actually did it somewhere and it worked. So yes, I'm taking this today.
And it also helps to apply. So even if you don't have any actual metrics coming out of other organizations, even if this is the very first experiment being done in time, you can look at, so say for agility, you're looking at the values and principles. That is what you're trying to instill in these different teams. Apply it or frame it in a way that they will understand. So pull from their very own experiences to say, hey, you're having these issues. If you do this, this is what you can achieve. So I like pulling examples. So going into organizations and doing trainings. I mentioned earlier that I did the intro to agility training as well as the prioritization sessions. I pulled actual tasks from their own experiences. So I was able to relate with them because I was pulling things from their day-to-days, their very own tasks that they may have had to do, conversations with my boss. So I did a lot of research to say, hey, these are the issues that you guys are facing. These are things that we can do. These are results that we can get, so that, it really brought it home for them because it was something that they could easily understand.
Understood. Okay. Yeah, I see. Very insightful session.
Thank you.
So awesome. Let me just see if there's nothing in the chat. No. Okay. So I am going to thank you. Thank you a lot for this session, Shanka. Maybe because some of the people are actually maybe new to Agile, you can't imagine all of the nuggets that you've received today. As old Agilists, I think a lot of people can say how much value there was in this 1 hour. There was a lot of points. There will be a replay. Don't hesitate to come back and listen to it. Buy small bite to be able to apply and apply all what have been said. Thank you very much, Shanka, for sharing those information. Thank you, all participants who have joined this session. Yes, Shanka, you want to say a word?
No, just thanks to everyone for joining. And I hope to see you guys again next year.
Yes, thank you, Shanka.
Won't hesitate to
Really
invite.
great session.
Literally, you're on our top list, so there's no way you're escaping us.
Yes.
Oh, we can say directly. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop then the director of